You know, it's funny because if you talk in the ed reform circles now, I mean, the big buzzword's human capital. You know, this is all about human capital. And, you know, we've been doing this for 10 years now, and I think we knew from day one that that was the key. I mean, you got to have a great teacher in every classroom. And, you know, the rest of the stuff's great, you know, computers and stuff and things, that's all dandy. But if you don't have a great teacher in the classroom, it doesn't really matter. A lot of places, everyone sort of writes off the first few years as well. You know, that's when you learn how to be a great teacher, and you're not really a good teacher till like your third or fourth year. Well, like that's great for the teacher, but they got 3 years of kids that are going through their classroom, and you know that's 2 or 3 years of bad instruction. I mean, that sets kids back forever. It's about discipline and teaching our kids how to make good decisions and be disciplined people. And it's about love, you know. I mean, I think it's that balance of, you know, tough and love. And I think our best teachers, they're like alchemists, you know. They can put those two things together, and they know when to put their arm around a kid and, you know, give them the pep talk and show some love, and they know when to, you know, I don't want to say get in a kid's face, but, you know, they know when to raise their voice and get a kid's attention. And I think, you know, our best teachers can bring those two things together. And I think that's really the culture of this place, is that we want to hold each other accountable. We want to push each other to be great, but we want to do it in a loving way. And so from there, we've tried to set up systems that, you know, allow us to do that. I mean, from the basic ones, just the size of the school, and making sure that this isn't, you know, a school of 3,000 kids where, you know, students go from classroom to classroom and maybe, you know, once a week someone calls them by their first name. That's not this place. I love doing the home visits. So the home visits are when, you know, after a kid's, you know, name's been picked in the lottery, we go and visit their house, and we go through the contract with them and their parents, and we talk about this is what it means to be a student at Yes. And, you know, the reason I love this is, you know, we have 4,000 kids on our wait list. So when you go to a house, I mean, that family really has won the lottery. I mean, this is going to be his legitimate pathway or her legitimate pathway to go to college and really change the dynamics of that entire family. So it's fun to be there because, you know, they're excited. And the contract, I think, it's symbolic. It's, you know, what we want parents to understand is that this has got to be a team effort. You know, if it's just us wanting this thing and them not really caring and the kid really not wanting to be here, this isn't going to work. And if it's just the kid wanting to be here and we're not doing our job and the parents aren't supporting them, it's not going to work. So part of it is just saying, look, this is a three-legged stool. It's us, it's your kid, and it's you. And if we work together for the next 7 years, your kid's going to be able to go to any college they want to. The signage and the messaging and, you know, when you walk into a classroom, I mean, there's stuff up all over the walls. You know, all that's intentional. When I was a teacher, I mean, my goal was that even if the kids aren't paying attention to me and they're looking around the room or daydreaming, I want them learning something, right? There really has to be kind of a marketing campaign every day around why are you here, what this is going to lead to, and why college is really important, and the kind of people that we want our kids to be. Part of it is just making sure that kids are getting the right messages, because when they're not here, they're bombarded with a whole other set of them, you know, whether it's on TV or from their, you know, peers or just being in the neighborhood. And so if we're not aware of that and trying to, you know, fight that with positive messaging here, we're fooling ourselves. So student council basically came up with these things, you know, and you know, we tweaked it a little bit. And so when we looked at it, we said, well, look, you know, some of these are behaviors and some of these are values. So we kind of divided them up into what we call the Yes Prep Thinks and Acts. And so this, along with the core values, have really become kind of the cornerstone for the culture of the school. So I feel like, you know, one of my jobs and the jobs of the leadership across this organization is to make sure that we're living those signs, that we're living those values, and that we are walking, breathing examples of the kind of people we want our kids to be. There was a time when, you know, the post office swore they could not deliver a package overnight. Next day air was impossible. And, you know, FedEx got to a certain size and UPS came along and they started to grow. And guess what happened? You know, FedEx figured out, or the post office figured out how to do next day air. And that's what we're going to do to the district. We're not going to replace the district, but we're going to get to a certain size where we're going to force HISD and other districts in Houston to improve. They're going to have to figure out how to deliver a package overnight. And what delivering a package overnight means, not making any excuses why kids who live in certain neighborhoods can't all be prepared to go to college. It's kind of human nature. Like, when the first thing you want to do is kind of, I call it picking up the magnifying glass before you pick up the mirror. And, instead of picking up the mirror and saying, okay, what are we doing wrong? You pick up the magnifying glass and you try and figure out all the reasons why this thing's not really working, or it's smoke and mirrors, or, they can do things that we can't. And, I get that. I mean, it's human nature. And it does create some tension. And I think what we've tried to do by opening up the doors and saying, look, here it is, it goes back to the transparency thing that we talked about a little while ago. I mean, this is who we are. Like, we're not going to apologize for it. And if there's things that we can do that you can't, I mean, my question is, well, how come? I mean, we're a public school too. You're a public school. Like, why can't you do those things? And no one's really ever been able to give me a really good answer for that. And we want to share. It's in our best interest for all the schools in Houston to be great. And we don't win by getting to be the darlings, of the media or whatever, because we've gotten great results. We win if more schools are great because of what we're doing. And if we can be the proof point, or the experiment, or the Petri dish, or the R&D lab, or whatever it is you want to call it, for the larger system, I mean, that's the role we welcome. And I think now, because we've been doing this for 10 years, in my mind, it's time to get this out of the Petri dish and out of the R&D lab, and it's time to take this to scale.
For more information about what works in public education, go to edutopia.org.